What if I told you some of the greatest scientific discoveries in human history were built on suffering, not accidents, not war, but deliberate experiments on real people, children, prisoners, patients, entire communities? For decades, governments and scientists crossed moral lines in the name of progress, and some of these dark experiments were hidden from the public for years. Tonight, you're going to hear the disturbing true stories they hoped the world would forget, because history is often far darker than we were taught. Human history is filled with incredible achievements. We landed on the moon. We cured diseases. We built civilizations that changed the world. But behind many breakthroughs, there are stories soaked in secrecy, manipulation, and cruelty.
And the terrifying part? Most ordinary people had no idea what was happening until decades later. Today, we're diving into some of the darkest human experiments ever conducted in history. These are real events, real victims, and real warnings about what happens when power exists without morality.
Number 1. The Tuskegee Experiment. In 1932, in the state of Alabama, the U.S. government began what would become one of the most infamous medical scandals in history. The study involved hundreds of African-American men, many of them poor farmers. The researchers told the men they were receiving free medical treatment, but that was a lie. The real purpose of the experiment was to study what happened when syphilis was left untreated. And here's the horrifying part. Even after doctors discovered penicillin could cure the disease, the researchers intentionally refused to treat the patients. For decades, the men suffered blindness, mental illness, organ failure, and death. Some unknowingly passed the disease to their wives and children, and many of them never understood they were part of an experiment. The study continued for 40 years before the public finally learned the truth in 1972. By then, the damage was irreversible. The scandal destroyed trust in the medical system for generations, and it forced the world to confront an uncomfortable question. How far will institutions go when they believe nobody is watching? Number 2. Unit 731. During World War II, Imperial Japan secretly operated a military research facility known as Unit 731. Officially, it was presented as a research center. In reality, it became one of the most horrifying laboratories in human history. Prisoners, including civilians, women, and children, were used for brutal experiments. Some were infected with deadly diseases like plague and cholera. Others were exposed to freezing temperatures so researchers could study hypothermia. Many victims were operated on without anesthesia, alive. The goal was to develop biological weapons and gather data for war. Thousands died inside Unit 731, and after the war ended, many of the scientists avoided punishment by handing their research data to foreign governments. For decades, the full truth remained hidden. Even today, Unit 731 remains one of the darkest examples of how science can become monstrous, when human life loses all value. Number 3. MK-Ultra. Now imagine discovering your own government secretly experimented on human minds. That's exactly what happened during the Cold War. In the 1950s, the CIA launched a classified program called MK-Ultra. Its mission? To explore mind control techniques. Researchers tested drugs, hypnosis, psychological torture, sensory deprivation, and other extreme methods. Many subjects had no idea they were being experimented on. Some people were secretly given LSD without consent. Others suffered severe psychological trauma that lasted for years. The CIA destroyed many records related to the program, but investigations later revealed the shocking scale of the experiments. The fear of communist brainwashing pushed intelligence agencies into morally terrifying territory, and it left behind one chilling lesson. When fear controls governments, ethics often disappear first. Number 4. The Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo wanted to understand how ordinary people behave when given power. So he created a fake prison inside Stanford University. College students were randomly assigned roles as prisoners or guards. What started as a simple psychological experiment spiraled into chaos. Within days, the guards became abusive and cruel. Prisoners showed signs of emotional breakdowns, anxiety, and trauma. Some participants had to leave early because of severe psychological distress. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks.
It was shut down after only 6 days. The results shocked the world because it suggested something deeply disturbing. Under certain conditions, ordinary people can quickly become capable of cruelty, not because they are monsters, but because power can transform behavior faster than we think.
Number 5. The Little Albert Experiment. In 1920, psychologists conducted an experiment on a baby known only as Little Albert. The goal was to prove that fear could be conditioned into humans. At first, Albert showed no fear toward a white rat. But every time he touched the animal, researchers made a terrifying loud noise behind him. Eventually, Albert began crying at the sight of the rat alone. But it didn't stop there. Soon, the child became afraid of anything similar. Fur coats, dogs, masks, even Santa Claus beards. The experiment successfully demonstrated conditioned fear. But there was one major problem. The researchers never tried to remove the trauma they created. Nobody knows exactly what happened to little Albert later in life. And today, the experiment is remembered as a chilling example of how easily the human mind can be manipulated, especially when ethics are ignored.
Number 6. Human radiation experiments. After World War II, fear of nuclear warfare spread across the world. Governments desperately wanted to understand radiation, but some experiments crossed horrifying moral boundaries. In secret studies, hospital patients, pregnant women, prisoners, and soldiers were exposed to radioactive materials. Many victims were never informed about the risks. Some believed they were receiving normal medical treatment. Others were deliberately placed near nuclear test zones to observe radiation effects. Years later, investigations uncovered the truth. The experiments revealed how fear and military competition during the Cold War pushed governments into dangerous territory. And once again, ordinary people paid the price. The darkest moments in history rarely begin with evil people announcing evil plans. Most begin quietly, with secrecy, with justification, with people convincing themselves that the end justifies the means. And that's what makes these stories terrifying. The experiments we discussed tonight were carried out by educated people, scientists, doctors, officials, people who believed they were serving a greater purpose. History reminds us that intelligence alone does not create humanity. Morality does. So the next time someone says history is boring, but remember this: history is not just about the past. It is a warning about the future.